Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is a presentation to go over the system hack, mitigation strategy, and some common attacks that we've experienced over the past 30 days. So let's jump right into it. The first section, we're going to go through the hack. So for the hack, after running nmap to enumerate the system or to do some discovery on the network, the Coptrix machine was discovered residing on IP address 192.168.56.118. And so the next command was, of course, to enumerate that system. And the command I used was the nmap switch p switch a on that IP address. The results indicated a handful of different vulnerabilities on some open ports. The Samba service used for file and print sharing running on port 139 was selected as the target of the attack due to some known vulnerabilities with that SMB service. The next thing that I did was I used Metasploit to scan for the specific SMB version that was running on that IP address, and a Google search returned some results indicating that this version of Samba is vulnerable to remote code execution, which is never a good thing, but it's good in terms of this hack. I then went to exploit database to obtain a raw export of that exploit code. And here you can see the top example is the actual code that was taken from the exploit database. And then the bottom example is a screenshot of that code pasted into a Kali root terminal. After compiling the code into an executable, the exploit was initiated using brute force mode. And then after doing that, just a few seconds later, the exploit indicated that it was successful and I gained root access without issue. Now, the next part that needed to be done, of course, is adding myself as a user onto that Coptrix machine. So you can see there on the top example, I used the whoami command, indicated that I was root. And then I attempted to use the user add command, but it was not in the location expected. So we use the command user add locate. And after that command was located, I added myself, my last name is Braswell, and set a password. And then moved over to the Coptrix machine where you can see that that login was successful using the credentials that I provided in Kali. So for the mitigation strategy summary to mitigate some issues, protecting against privilege escalation, 4 main bullets here. Reviewing and securing systems, services, and processes, ensuring each runs as a separate user account, not as the root. By doing that, that keeps a little bit of separation there. And next, specifying limited capabilities for SUID and SGID binaries to allow more subtle control of executable root privileges. Ensuring the principle of least privilege is applied to sudo, which will only allow specific commands to be executed by specific users. And finally, employing auditing tools to discover misconfigurations in file system permissions, which could allow unauthorized users to view or hijack other users' credentials or the processes that they're using. And now moving into the common attacks that we've experienced. Buffer overflow. So a buffer overflow occurs when a program tries to store more data in the buffer than it is able to hold, or when a program attempts to place data into an area of memory that is outside of the buffer. It's a programming error or vulnerability that malicious actors can exploit to get unauthorized access to systems. It's typically, it is focused on buffers, which are portions of computer memory that keep data in storage while it moves between different places. And so this overflow occurs whenever a specific quantity of data contained in the buffer exceeds that set capacity for storage in the buffer, and then it's pushed, the excess data is pushed into memory locations next to that buffer and corrupts or replaces the data stored in those locations, so hence the overflow portion of that. For privilege escalation, we talked a little bit about that in the hack. Privilege escalation involves obtaining elevated privileges beyond what a user is entitled or intended to have. Privilege escalation is defined as an act that results in illegal access to elevated privileges beyond what is typically allowed for a user. This attack can be carried out by an external threat or an insider. The process of escalation of privileges is a crucial element of a cyber attack and typically involves the exploitation of a vulnerability that already exists in privilege escalation, such as a bug within the system, some kind of a configuration error, or deficient access controls. Rootkits. A rootkit is a collection of tools that allow unauthorized users to take control of an operating system of a computer without being discovered. It is a type of malware. A rootkit is created to grant malicious actors control over a system. That's the whole point of a rootkit. Although most rootkits affect software and operating systems, some may also affect a device's hardware and firmware. Rootkits are skilled at disguising their presence. They're great at hiding once they're inside a system. However, while they're in there, they are still very active even though they may be hidden. Once they've gained access to computer systems, rootkits allow cybercriminals access to personal and financial data, allow them to install malware, or to utilize the computers as part of a larger botnet in order to engage in a DDoS attack. Trojans. Trojan is a malicious software program that masquerades as legitimate software. Think of the Trojan horse and the soldiers that were inside of that. The program appears harmless until the Trojan's executable is run, which then installs the hidden malware. The Trojan horse is a program downloaded and installed on an operating system that appears harmless but is actually malicious. Unexpected changes in computer settings and unusual behavior, even though the computer is not in use, are possible indicators that a Trojan is running on an operating system. This type of malware is usually hidden in innocent-looking email attachments offered via free downloads from websites in an exe file. Things of that nature. When the user clicks the attachment in the email or downloads that specific program, the malware is hidden. The malware hidden inside is transferred to the user system, and once installed, the hidden malware can execute the task it was designed to carry out, whatever that may be. Backdoors. Backdoor is a method to gain access to a system or encrypted data that evades usual security controls of the system. So it's just trying to completely circumvent coming in through the front door, which may be very protected, and instead using that backdoor entrance. The backdoor is a program that permits cyber attackers access to computers remotely. Backdoors can be found in both hardware and software components, and many backdoor applications use the IRC backbone, which receives commands from popular IRC chat applications. Backdoors can also be spread through malware-laden apps installed on mobile and smart devices. Backdoors play an essential role in targeted cyber attacks because they can be employed to gain control of vulnerable systems, allowing attackers to steal identities and make connections without being discovered. They're also installed during cyber attacks to allow persistence in a system, allow an attacker to leave the system and then come back in through that backdoor whenever they need to come back in. Viruses. A virus is a computer program that is able to duplicate itself and infect a computer without the permission, knowledge, or consent of the user. A virus can cause data loss or corruption on the computer, erase all the data on a hard drive, and utilize email programs to transfer copies of itself to other devices. So just like a virus within the human body, how it replicates, how it infects, it's going to be the same thing for a computer virus as well. The primary function of computer viruses is to disrupt systems, create major operational issues, and ultimately result in data leakage or loss. One of the most important things to be aware of and to remember regarding computer viruses is that they are created to be able to infect software and systems by design. Computer viruses are typically attached to executable host files that launch the malicious code when an infected file is accessed. This code is then transmitted from the file or program it's attached to through networks, drives, file sharing applications, or virus-infected email attachments. Return-oriented programming, or ROP. ROP is a technique by which an attacker can induce arbitrary behavior in a program whose control flow has been diverted without injecting any code by chaining together short instruction sequences already present in a program's address space, each of which ends in a return instruction. ROP is a method often employed in the attack on security vulnerabilities due to memory corruption, similar to the buffer overflow attack that was mentioned previously. Security vulnerabilities relating to memory corruption occur when a privileged program is forced to corrupt its memory space in such a way that the corrupted memory regions impact the application's security. The privileged program could be forced into this condition by an unprivileged user giving the program specially designed data and triggering a specific fault in the application. Social engineering is a threat method that heavily relies on human interactions and frequently involves manipulating individuals into breaking security protocols or best practices to obtain access to networks, systems, physical locations, or in attempts to have some type of financial gain from that interaction. Malicious actors employ social engineering techniques to disguise their real motives and identities while presenting themselves as trustworthy individuals or some kind of a trustworthy source of information. The aim is to manipulate the user into divulging their sensitive data or to gain access to an organization's systems that that individual may have access to. Several social engineering attacks rely on the innate human desire to help and the fear of being punished. Social engineering is a preferred method among cyber attackers because it is generally easier to manipulate a person than to discover a vulnerability or a flaw in a network or software. Attackers often employ social engineering strategies as the first step in a more extensive campaign to gain access to the network or system, to obtain that sensitive information, or to spread malware. And that concludes this presentation. Following is the reference page for this. Thank you very much for your time and have a great afternoon.